Welcome to Wealth Dynasty. Today we're excited to have Danny Farmer, who is the chairman and founder of Figtree, which is an RIA, registered investment advisory firm located in Barbados. Danny is a very experienced investment advisor with huge background, and we're excited to hear from him because he has a lot of experience working with families, developing and preserving generational wealth.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a great episode. Danny's an expert in generational wealth strategies and planning, and he looks outside the box. He's got strategies that a lot of people overlook, and we're going to kind of deep dive into his top 3 ideas. We're going to go into some other ways that he's been using, maybe some unconventional ways that he's been able to help families create and perpetuate that wealth for generations to come. So it's going to be a great episode. I'm super excited. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join and be a part of this podcast. We've been trying to get this one organized for a little while, so I'm very excited to be a part of it today and see what we can get into and, what really inspires me to kind of focus on the families that we assist and have been assisting over the last almost 10 years.
So Danny, tell us what turned the corner for you to decide to serve families and family offices in the Caribbean in particular. What has turned the corner for you?
Yeah, the niche that I saw or the missing part that I saw, mainly, yes, in the Caribbean, but I think it's part of why we see globally this, continuous expansion of multi-client family offices, family office, people talking about family office. Is there a definition of family office? No single, family office is the same. So there's lots of dialogue happening, and a lot of the reason I think that is based on the missing parts that I saw for mainly entrepreneurial families that are still running their family businesses. And what happened is a generation ago, or even 2 generations, they would have been using kind of professionals to support their business and their growth. So they would have either leaned on the accounting profession, legal profession, or something similar. And what's happening is, as those professions have become very specific and it has to be based on the scope of work and have a specific engagement, those founders and the families that are running these businesses no longer have that profession to lean on to help guide them on the everyday things that they're facing when, I have a new business idea I want to start up, or I want to acquire this business. Where do I put it? How do I tuck it in? What legal entity should it go under? How does this then change my overall financial plan? And so with that, a lot of it is they were trying to then deal with it within their own holding companies. But at the end of the day, the holding companies and the experiences of the persons that drive those businesses and help them to drive the day-to-day operational business don't have the same level of experience on the tax structuring and then managing the personal liability and the personal wealth side. So what I saw as being an investment banker for, most of my career in the region, where most of the larger businesses are still family-led, is that I got very involved and became that kind of trusted advisor, having to understand all of the nuances of the families, what they were, goals personally, and what they were trying to set up and get right, along with then the actual operation and running that, and kind of how do they tie those 2 together. And so when I set up Figtree, it was primarily to focus on what we call family office solutions, which was then dealing with those kind of bigger bucket items of the structuring, tax, financial planning, liability management, and so on. It wasn't so much to then actually do the wealth advisory and advise on the actual portfolios that they may have, because at that point, I thought that they would have already had their person, whether it was at one of the bigger institutions, Morgan Stanley or similar. But what I've then subsequently come to realize is that that isn't working all that well for them, because at the end of the day, once you're trying to devise your plan and it becomes very personalized to you, if you do not have everybody lined up in the same way, then you can kind of get a disjointed outcome, and it doesn't then end up working, and you kind of see too much overlap, or, as I say, the actual goal that you're trying to achieve starts to run kind of not parallel, and it starts to run different, to the goal of the family.
What do you find as the number one concern or goal or priority of the families you work with?
So I think it boils all the way down to legacy. But what does that legacy mean for them? So that was why then, and that's why our tagline is your legacy, our focus is for everybody. That means a little something different, but it is the main goal of each of the families because they're trying to figure out, I've spent my life's effort, whether this was handed to me by my father or the past generation, building this business, and I've now got to get it ready to hand to that next generation. And that may be hand the actual reins of the running of the business, or make it very clear to the next side that I don't think this is what they want to do and or are capable of doing. And therefore we either need to professionalize the business or we need to monetize the business. And then once we've done either, how do we then set up to make sure that we can then manage and run the legacy of that family, whether it's the pot of money, whether it's the business and the pot of money. How do we then let it manage the various parts of the family as we go forward? And then a lot of the discussions we have is not only from that overall succession planning that may come in, but how does that get into the nuances of as we go generation by generation, and that set of people gets larger and larger and more mouths to feed, it becomes, where does this enterprise stop? Does it continue to be able to feed all of these mouths? Does it only do to a particular direct lineage? Does it start to minimize what it can pay out? How are all of these things managed? Because when you speak to a founder is really good about coming up with the business idea and the businesses that they've set up. They do not actually have a clear, generally, understanding of what it is that they want to do and pass on. They know that they want to make sure they do it while they're still around and can get it done in a way, but they need guidance because the way that they want to prescribe it sometimes to that next generation actually doesn't make sense because the next generation isn't equipped and thinks about it differently or has different priorities.
Well, the mentality is different. I mean, if you built a business from the ground up and you came from very humble beginnings, and by the time you have your kids, you kind of have something established, the mentality is going to be very different. The generation and the thought process of, and not to mention just, as the younger generation comes up, they're going to have different ideas. What are some of those ideas and some of those strategies that you've had to implement with families as they're, going from like maybe a grandpa down to the grandkids, or fathers giving, passing on the business to their kids, or you have some specific examples?
So there's two key issues that we generally identify. One is, or that you generally kind of as a part of the conversation, let's say, but these two generally with every family I've dealt with are the two main things they do not either agree on or think about as they should. One is, at some point, I am the generation that has run it. I've been able to then pull from this business to run my family on the personal side, as well as continue to grow and manage this business. And I've worked my whole life. I've done all of this. I've set it up, blood, sweat, and tears. I've done it from the ground zero all the way through. Now I need to take that step back. I want to enjoy. I want to continue to live well, but the next generation is coming in. They're keen, they're eager, they want to make their mark, and therefore they may not want to be paying out massive dividends. They may not want to be paying out major amounts from the business because they want to now reinvest in the business in the areas that they see opportunities to then grow that business and make their mark on the business for the family to come, because now again, the generation has got bigger, so there's more mouths to feed. So then there's this big disconnect where the current generation hasn't put in any kind of planning on the retirement side. So everybody that's a professional, we're always taught, as you start your job, you've got your retirement plans, you set up, you do your different things that you need to kind of make sure that when you're time to put up and hang up those boots, you can live the life that you want and you can go off onto the sunset, travel, enjoy the rest of your life. These family founders, because they're so focused on just the operation of running the business, they have never planned for it. So 99.9%, if not 100% of them, never do the retirement planning for themselves and don't actually have that properly set up. The second part is that they think, well, I've bled, sweat, and tears, and I've had to start from the ground zero. When granddad brought me in, he made me work on the ground floor, and I had to start my way up, sweep to this, and I had to do all of these.
Digging the holes.
Whole thing, always like, I got to put molasses going uphill or something, like a big whole story that they give you. But they don't understand that you've spent also blood, sweat, and tears educating these kids, right? So they've had a better life because of what you provided. And then all of a sudden they forget this. So now the kid wants to get involved. Okay, can't be CEO day one, needs to be in somewhere else. But they've gone and got a finance degree. They may have an MBA. They may be a CFA in their own right. Why can't that person start in a much more senior position? And generally it's because they, want to have them bleed and sweat a bit more than that they've had to. But so we have to step in and kind of say, guys, look, forget who this is. Forget this is your son. Forget this is your daughter. Here is their CV. Based on this CV, talking with your HR team, we think this person is right for this type of job. And you would hire them in a heartbeat if you saw that CV for that right type of job. So that's
that
where
wasn't your family. Yeah.
Now we're going to put them in a position that they're really going to add value day one. They're not going to feel hardships and whatever else that they're going to be dealing with, but it's more of, I can add real value to my family business in something that I've spent a long time studying, getting right, getting my own experience, doing internships, whatever, in order to then add my part to the family business. Then the part that we have to add is between the family charter or similar, so the family values, let's call it, as well as then give them a sense of the rest of the business. So from the succession plan to ultimately allow these persons to then lead the business, either as CEO or in a directorship type role, if it then goes to then being a professional who's going to run it, next generation, because they're not suited to be the CEO, but they can play the CFO, they can play some role within the company. We identify all of that and then make sure that we spend a lot of time in the grounding of what is important to the family. What are those family values that have done well by this family in order to then run this business as well and allow it to be as successful as it has. And that's why one of our two biggest, our own Figtree values, two of them that we hold most dear, is family and listening. And that's what we try to then impart on the families that we deal with.
That's awesome.
Excellent. So for our listeners, define a little bit more what you mean by professionalize and monetize.
Right. So the difference that founders have to focus on is, as I say, is once they've identified, can that next generation run the business, or do they want to run the business as the founder has? And if the answer to either one is no, and therefore you have two options at that point. You have the option of professionalize, and what I mean by professionalize is you are going to then have to set up a family advisory council, whatever it is that you want to call it, advisory board, and or board of directors that will have some of the family involved, as well as other independent directors that will fill in any of the missing skill sets that next generation doesn't have or doesn't have the experience in. So whether that's financial, deal, capital markets, whether it's accountancy, so understanding actually from a risk analysis perspective and kind of getting into audits and the audit and risk committees of a business or whatever the case may be, you need to kind of make sure that you filled in at that board level or advisory board level. And then you're going to have that board pick the top 3 or 4 kind of executive managers of that business, and then make sure that the family does 2 things within the family board. Their main aspect is filling out what I call the family charter or similar, which is, again, what are the key values that are important to us? What are the key policies and key ingredients as we see it as the founders, while the founder is still around, that has allowed this business to be successful? Is it key contracts? Is it key relationships? Is it we have always treated our employees as family and we've made sure that they've had alignment from a compensation perspective to how well we've done. So there is more focus on that. So that's why we feel that our employees have been loyal to us, have gone through thick and thin with us, and therefore do more than the average, is because we've always made them feel a part of the family and feel if we do well, they will do well. And so you start to look at, from the professional perspective, how do we incorporate what has made it successful from the founders, but understanding that who is going to run it is actually going to be people that are not from the family. And that may be the best idea and the best thing for the family and for that company or group of companies on a go-forward basis. Then from a monetization, if you feel, I don't know if we're even equipped, want to, given the multitude of interests and the size of the generation that's coming, it may not be a business that can scale fast enough or big enough to continue to feed the generations as they come. And therefore, the founder may say, you know what is probably best is let me, while I'm still around, get the best value for this business by selling that business or monetizing the business or the group of companies. And now with the pot of cash, it sometimes is then also easier to then divvy up to that next generation to try and create fairness. And that was one of the bigger families that I've ever worked for. That was his big thing. He asked me one time, he's like, Danny, I need you to go on the plane with my kids. I'm not going to be on the plane. And I want you to ask them over the next 5 hours of that flight, what do they actually want to do? Do they want to be running this business? Do they really want to grow it? Can they see themselves doing it? Or would they rather manage a pot of cash and just continue to allow the next generations to benefit from all that I've done?
How'd that work out?
So it was the latter. They decided
Okay.
that, yeah, we don't want to work. And this was the key thing, insight. They don't want to work as hard as the dad not because I'm being selfish and I'm a brat and I want to basically, just live the high life and I just want to
trust fund babies.
be a trust fund baby, go surf the world, whatever it may be. It was actually, I never got to see my dad. I never spent time with my dad. I really don't even know who he is because his life was this business. His hobby was this business. He had nothing other than this business. I don't want that for my kids. And therefore, I want to make sure that I'm there, I'm present, and I can, ensure that I give them the values that I think are important so they don't become trust fund babies and then don't get ruined by all of this money that's going to be coming their way. So I was like, well, that's hugely insightful. That helps us with the planning that we can then put in place to make sure. And then over the next 7 or 8 years, they have slowly been monetizing their businesses.
Mm-hmm. How do you lead or guide your clients in that discussion? So, I'm sure everybody's different, right? So how do you help your client come to a determination? Because that must be very hard for them to do.
So everybody comes at it at different points in time, and you have to realize, as you do as being an advisor, you can only, as they say, lead a horse to water, right? You can't make it drink. But the key is to kind of continuously show them the mirror of, you've done really well. You've built a substantive business. I know you love your son. I'm an experienced person. You know me to be an experienced person. And I've hired lots of people. I've seen what real good executives are, what they're capable of, how they effectively manage teams and run businesses. Unfortunately, I think we both know your son can't do it. Not saying he can't play a role, and here's the role that I think he could play. As I say, you'll realize that as a part of the conversation, they're not ready. They don't want to have it. Some of them think they're going to live forever. And some of them think, you know what? No one had a plan for me. Not my issue. Next generation deal with it. But I would say that the closer a person realizes that they're not immortal, you're not here forever, and they have any kind of health scare or whatever, then it becomes, of course, a little easier. But the key for us is always just trying to have in those check-ins, and I try to do it at least 2 or 3 times a year with the clients to go, where are we now? Here's our situation. You're not getting any younger. Your son is getting involved and actually is making an impact. Can you let go of those reins a little bit? Can you release a little bit of the control? He isn't going to do it the way you would do it, and that's okay. But he has to learn his. And why not let him make the mistakes now while you're still here, and you guys can then have the conversation. He can learn from it, but not because you're hand holding him. Remember when he was a child, you didn't go around with a safety net, making sure he didn't fall off the path or the bike or the tree. You made sure he learned. We have to make sure he does the same thing if it's to be a part of the business or not. So it's just regular check-ins and being honest with it. And any client that isn't prepared to have those conversations, then there's not a lot of help we can give from a Figtree perspective. So we would just bow out of those relationships and let them continue as is. We're not going to force the issue, but we are going to definitely try to make sure, because we think we want to be, or we think our role is to be a good steward and a trusted advisor for that. And, a trusted advisor is not a yes man. A trusted advisor is a true friend that was going to tell you.
Yeah, sometimes have a hard conversation if it's needed.
Correct. You need to have that hard conversation.
Yeah. Danny, here at Wealth Dynasty, of course, we're in the life insurance business. Can you tell us how you have seen life insurance, or how do you see life insurance helping these families?
Or how maybe
for a
any
lot of
cases
the
that you've
bigger
used
ones, for a lot of the bigger ones, I would say that there's generally 2 components that we would like to talk to them about. One is, again, how do we reinforce and manage the business? So how do we manage the risks and the liabilities within a business? And if one of those liabilities identified is you as a key man, and or the children or anybody within the family as key persons to running that business and making sure that business runs effectively and for the benefit of all stakeholders, including the family. Well, if that's truly important and they are truly key, then we have to look at how do we manage that liability, and insurance is a really good way of doing that. And that's where you would set up some sort of key man insurance. And it doesn't have to be, because it's a family-owned business, it's private. It doesn't have to be the true sense of a key man insurance. It can literally just be what makes sense for that business in terms of size, amount, and for that family to protect against that liability. So if the business is worth $100 million and you start talking to them and say, okay, well, if this person was to pass untimely, that could ruin $25 million of that value. Well, we definitely have a massive liability, and we got to figure out, not only do we manage the succession planning and all of that to kind of reduce the liability in the everyday running of the business, but until we've done that, we better put some life insurance in place to the tune of around that amount. And that's where then the life insurance can play a part. And what a lot of the families like is an insurance that is going to pay them dividends in the future, meaning it's not just a term life insurance, it's more of a variable annuity type insurance, or has some sort of growth aspect that I can keep adding to either over time or upfront, that is then going to front load that to then give us a good investment return, and we see it as a true business asset. The second component is now, okay, again, because a lot of these founders haven't focused on retirement, 1, and or 2, the families are only going to continue to get bigger, and the business below it may be able to keep pace, but it may not. And therefore, how do we fill in those gaps? So 1 is, I've got really good benefit out of this, and I want to make sure that my children get benefit out of this and my grandchildren. So what I'm going to do is make sure that, okay, I think I'm going to pull $10 million out of the trust or $10 million out of this business. I want to repay that. How do I repay that? And again, yes, I could be putting certain money aside in my investment accounts and managing a legacy fund, which is always going to be a component. but sometimes we don't know when we're going to die or anytime. Therefore, hey, I think I'm doing the right thing, but all of a sudden I pass before I built it to the level on the legacy fund that I need to. Let's put that insurance in place just in case. So we use that as a component along with the legacy fund to basically pay into the legacy fund. And it's almost that with payment for anything that I've benefited from, to then kind of make sure that I'm not putting as much pain or as much drawdown on that fund during my life. So those are the two key ones that we focus on. And sometimes we look at kind of educational aspects as well. Like how can we use the surety of a life insurance to provide for the grandchildren's educations and everything else, instead of having to continue to then put aside bigger amounts of money to then build an education fund.
Mm-hmm. And as an advisor, how do you see the trade-off between, yes, I can earn more in my investments or use life insurance? Because a lot of people are concerned about that. And as an advisor, how do you view that?
So I had that actually this week. So one of the clients I met with was somebody who's like, I don't believe in life insurance. It's a waste of money. I can do better on my own if I put that same money. I said, okay, well, here's the two aspects that I want to challenge you on. One, you wake up tomorrow and something's happened in your business. Are you truly going to stay disciplined to putting away that $150,000 or the amount you've decided that you wanted to put away? Are you going to keep and maintain that discipline no matter what? Because you actually have the choice when it's you putting it away in an investment, rather than I don't want that insurance to lapse because of all that I've put in. So I know I have to make that, and that's going to be a direct pull every month. So it's kind of reinforcing or ensuring the discipline. So he was like, good point, but I feel I can be disciplined. Okay. Second point, you're now realize that you need to put aside for that education fund. And you want to make sure the grandchildren have the education that you'll be able to provide for your children. And you want to make sure you do that before you die. What happens if you don't wake up tomorrow? Do you have enough money put aside for that? If the answer is no, that's why insurance is a difference, because you can put that in place today, and whether you fully funded it or not, because you've got the insurance in place, it provides you the surety that at least that amount is going to be paid to your beneficiaries in order to then achieve the goal that you're trying to set it aside for. So if it's the education. So we try to kind of indicate that insurance provides a bit more on that surety side. And while there is that drag because of the premium cost built into the insurance, if you're able to, because then we always get, well, okay, well, you're giving me all the things that if something happens, I don't think anything like that's going to happen. I'm going to live for the next 30 years. And I go, fine. What do you think is a normal good return from a stable portfolio? I think 6% per year. Okay. If you live 30 years, most insurance set up properly in the same way that you would manage your investments is going to give you a 6% if you live for 30 years.
That's right. Yeah. Tax-free, directly to your beneficiaries.
So you're no different.
Right.
So tell me another issue with life insurance. So that same client was like, you know what? Okay, you've convinced me enough. Let's have a deeper conversation on this. So he went from being completely adamant, I'll never consider it, never do it, don't even talk to me, don't even raise it, to now, let's have more conversations about it. Maybe I should put this in place.
Let's run some numbers. Yeah. I mean, if you really take a look at it, like how much, let's say you get, you need $10 million sitting there. Once you get that coverage, you immediately have $10 million sitting there for your family. And, at the same time, if you started to try to build that up, even if you're putting away $100,000 every single month or whatever, it's going to take a while to get that money, that 10 million saved up.
Well, and the reality is life hits all the time, right? Constantly. And plans are constantly changing. We have dreams and ideals, and everybody knows that we all get punched in the face. Okay. It always happens. And, and you need the insurance to make up the difference.
Correct. And then the other part is in our part of the world where it is very unstable and you're dealing with currency issues. Sometimes governments change and become far left and progressive things happen. And for us, being able to have a US-based asset that you can then lean on and leverage if something was to happen in your home country, provides a lot of surety again. So for me, while yes, if you'd been able to build up to the same level on the investment side, yeah, sure. But it's going to take you a lot longer to build today, 30 years down the road, to get to $10 million, where I can get that life insurance and have that asset today by paying this premium. So to me, it's a nice surety to have for all of life's unexpecteds, for sure. And especially in our part of the world, those unexpected can happen fast.
Yeah. Well, Danny, thank you for sharing so much great information. And I'm sure our listeners are going to love what you've had to say today. Mark, any other questions?
Oh, man. Yeah. I guess you got anything else that you wanted to mention or anything else off the top of your head?
Any final comments, Danny?
Any final ideas?
No, I mean, I think, this is a big one that I would say that as I say, I was excited to join today and be a part of the podcast. And anytime I get a chance to speak as frankly on these type of topics and kind of the educational side, because I think especially within our party world, but I'm seeing more and more, even in developed markets, that there are so many family-run businesses, and the baby boomers and so on are now getting to that point. And again, what used to be in place and the people that they could lean on are not there for them anymore. And everybody has become the community has changed, and that community and family setting has changed. And because of that, I like these types of events, podcasts, whatever, that allows us to try and get that educational and let them know that, whether it's us, whether it's others, there are people out there that can guide you, help you, assist you through these matters. But even if you hear it on a podcast like this, it's going to then say, okay, well, these are the concerns I have, or these are the things I've never even thought of, but I really need now to think about, and how am I going to deal with it? And therefore, I need to kind of reach out to somebody to help me through this. So that's one of the key things that really excites me to be a part of podcasts, these types of events, which really gets that educational piece out, because I think it is sorely needed now, and people are looking for that kind of sense of community and sense of family, and it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, there might be people down, in the Caribbean or Latin America that don't know that they can get products, life insurance that will pay out in dollars. They may not know, or let's say somebody doesn't have a visa to come to the United States to sign paperwork. We can still get them US-based life insurance that pays out in dollars. You don't actually have to physically even come here to get these products, which is absolutely incredible. The amount of options for diversifying investments now, it's growing every single day. Honestly, there's just so many ways. And I think we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, is being able to diversify. You have your insurance, you have your main business that's generating this type of income, but getting the education to see all your options it's super important. So thank you so much for being on and telling us all that great information.
Anytime.
Yeah. All right, definitely gonna have you back. Man, that was great. Very grateful to have Danny on the podcast today. Lots of incredible information. He's just an incredible source of tons and tons of information, great education, and he just has a lot of experience with these families. What was your favorite part, Kurt? What do you think?
Well, I love his style. He's just laid back, educational, and right from the heart. And he's obviously very well educated. And he spent his 10,000 hours getting ready for these types of families.
Absolutely.
So, he's got all the background, and I just love the fact that he is very down to earth and easy to understand. He makes fairly complicated things sound, reasonably simple.
I really like how he talked about if a client and him, or, with Figtree, they don't see eye to eye, or he feels like it's not going to be a good fit. He's not trying to force himself into just shoving products or ideas or ideals onto a person or a family. You step back and let them make their own decisions. I think that's super, super important, because at the end of the day, customers have to be really happy and satisfied with who they're working with and comfortable. So I like that.
Well, hey, listeners, thanks for being here. Please subscribe, and we'll have more great podcasts in the future.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay.